All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to another Combat Ready Wednesday. Tonight, we're going to be talking about some pretty exciting topics. I think we're going to talk a lot tonight about some search tactics, and some questions or some tactics or some issues that that commonly come up in that conversation. So tonight, I'm going to be joined by a couple of my good friends and instructors. So we got Bill Cunningham. Bill, can you hear us all right?
I'm here loud and clear.
Good thing, buddy. And Ford is still firing up the technology out there in rural South Carolina, but I think we got the Wi-Fi connected. Ford, can you hear us? Ford, you
That's a
good? Okay, he's working on it. And then hopefully we're going to have Drew Evans. He is working tonight on Truck Company 16 in Washington, D.C., where he's a tillerman. And so hopefully he is going to, hopefully he's going to be able to check in between runs there. So, Ford, I think you got your thing muted. If you can unmute yourself once you get your technology squared away. But there were a lot of things that kind of came in as a discussion, that things that we wanted to bring up tonight. So, just kind of getting started, Bill, I know one of the things we were kind of talking about before we started on here was this idea of the verbal all clear. And what does that mean? And so for those that might not be familiar, what I mean by the verbal all clear is that, companies arrive on scene of a fire and somebody comes up to you, could be the homeowner, could be a neighbor, could be a family member, could be a cop, but whoever, somebody comes up to you and they're like, hey, firefighters, don't worry, everybody's out. And so you get that verbal report, that there's nobody trapped in the building. So, Bill, I'm sure that's happened to you one or more times. Any experience with that, or does that adjust your thinking or how you're prioritizing the search if that happens?
Honestly, just how we spoke earlier, the verbal all clear for me is really if I could get some information from that person pertaining to how the fire maybe had started. But as far as victims in or out of there, that person has zero credibility with me. So anything he says, it's all good. Don't worry about it. And just like we were talking about, this guy is the one that lit the fire in my eyes. You know what I mean? Like, I appreciate you, and I might take a step back eventually, but really our tactics are still strong, and we're still really just trying to get that big three done, just depending on where we're at in the firefight. If I'm the first due company versus the fifth due, and he says that to me, I'll relay that information if I get it early. Well, I guess I would relay it regardless, but
Just got the link.
it's not going to change my um, search idea off the bat.
Right, and I say that because I have seen departments, where if somebody says that, if you pull up and somebody says, "Oh, don't worry, nobody's in there," all of a sudden the primary search, takes a back seat, and there's either a lot less intensity involved in it, or in some cases it's not even done. And I think that is a very treacherous situation, right? So, obviously I don't have my stats handy, but I'm familiar here with what our friend is posting up on here from the firefighter rescue survey. That there are a number of vacants, or a number of times that it's reported that nobody's in the building, and obviously there ends up being somebody in the building, and we have that experience, kind of anecdotally through the firefighter rescue survey. But I mean, also many of us have had that experience personally. I mean, I know I've had that experience personally.
Mhm.
So I think that's a treacherous thing. I mean, to just kind of say we're not going to search just because somebody said they were out.
Yeah, I feel like no matter the fire, I take no assumption. I don't assume that everything's going to go smoothly. I don't assume that victims are in or out. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where you kind of just get the ball rolling, and this is why we talk about command and how we have benchmarks, regardless of what information is given to us over dispatch or the person standing in the front yard. We still hit our benchmarks, and that way we can run the same scene, hopefully over and over the same way with a good outcome.
I 100% agree, and it reminds me of just something I've always kind of said is that, when you talk about the search, there is no redos, right? After the fire, if you go in there and you find somebody passed away, say just in a smoke filled environment, not even with thermal burns, and you're like, uh-oh, maybe we should have searched this. Like, there is no rewind button, right? There's no
Right.
like undo where you get a chance to go back there and do it again. And I think that's where, that's kind of part of the mindset that comes together when we talk about, the idea that, it's not just what is searchable, but it's what is survivable, right? So, Drew,
Mhm.
what's up, man? You've been working on that mustache. Good for you, brother.
Oh yeah, it's coming along great.
Are we live in the tiller cage right now, or?
So I moved up to the smart end of the fire truck. So yeah,
Oh,
I'm sitting in the driver's seat right now. It's been a little busy today.
that old southeast be kicking, huh?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So glad you could jump on. And I know everybody, I told everybody you were on the rig tonight, so you might have to jump if you get a run. But, one of the things we were talking about, and I don't think this is an issue that we really encountered in the district, but I don't know if you've seen it elsewhere or whatever, but we were talking about this issue of the verbal all clear, where somebody kind of, you jump out of the rig and somebody runs up to you and says, don't worry, nobody's in there. If that happens, are you changing your tactics or your prioritization of the search at all, or what does that mean to you?
No, I mean, there's too many variables at play there, and there've definitely been instances and case studies done where someone's reported everyone's been out, and that's found to be false later after the fact and far too late. Um, that or that person that you run into may might not be the occupant of that unit or that apartment, if it is an apartment fire or something like that. So no, I don't put too much stock into that, into someone saying on scene, hey, everyone's out. I might ask again. It's going to play in the back of my mind, but it's not going to change the course of any actions we're going to take.
Yeah, and you're probably familiar, Drew. I mean, I know there's a classic Kentland story about a fire just a block or so behind the firehouse where they, as they pulled up, somebody was telling the tower crew, "Hey, no, there's nobody in there," and apparently it was a pretty marginal situation, meaning the fire was really rocking, and was borderline, whether that was gonna be offensive or defensive. But they had already gone in to make the search, and had come out with two kids. And the backstory was that basically there was some kind of discrepancy between a separated mother and a father, and I think the story was that the father had just he had the kids and he had just brought them home and dropped them off, but he didn't want to talk to mom, so he didn't tell mom, and then mom didn't know the kids were home. House catches on fire. Mom thinks nobody's in there, and her kids were in there. And fortunately, they continued with the search anyway. Found those kids, got them out, and as I remember, both of them survived. They're very very critical, but they survived, and that's just kind of one example of like you don't know what you don't know, and once it's all over, you can't go back and redo it. You know what I'm saying? So I would be a huge advocate of erring on the side of caution and Drew, as I'm sure you remember the old Mick McKenzie saying, it's the search isn't done until we've done the search. Don't matter what
Right.
nobody else says. We clear it. Ford, you with
And
us? Or go ahead, Bean.
Yeah,
the
can you
the
hear?
other
Can you hear me?
the other scenario you might run into, right, probably less often, but that person you meet in the front yard, maybe that's the person who set the fire.
Bill said that right before
It,
you got
it
on here, and
yeah,
it's it sounds crazy, but some of us
it
work in
happens.
neighborhoods where that happens. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
Ford, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, the thing is, it's the same concept of no matter what time of day it is. I mean, you still got to clear the search, right? I've had so many people, even like chief officers or incident commanders say that it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's probably nobody there, or immediately it's an abandoned building, or it's whatever the case may be. But even now, man, you got to expect people in place of residence, 23 and a half hours a day. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's occupied. I mean, literally people are home more so now than they are ever. You know what I mean? I'm not taking anybody's word for it until I'm actually putting my eyes and hands on it to confirm for myself.
Yeah, yeah, and again, I mean, it's just whoever coined this axiom that it's not what's survivable but searchable. I mean, they really hit the nail on it. Like, I mean, it's a deep topic, risk analysis and size up and all that. But I mean, the end of the day is, we're the people with the experience, we're the people with the training, we're the people with thousands of dollars of protective equipment. Like, if the situation allows us to search the building, principally a residential building, apartment or house, that's our job. I mean, it's just too time sensitive to sit there and hem a haw about like, well, do you think we should search it? I don't know. They said they were all out. Like, you don't have time for that. Like, you either do or you don't. I mean, this is really one of those cases where, talking about survivability of fire victims, seconds really do count. You know. So, anybody got any other thoughts on that topic there? So, another thing I wanted to
Yeah.
bring up, and this is an issue that I hear about a lot over the country, and I know from working with everybody here, it's not necessarily an issue that we've faced, and I would consider us fortunate for that. But in a lot of departments, it has become a thing that the primary search must be done with a hand line. And stretching a hand line for primary search and fire control and stuff like that. And there are departments that I've talked to where they are literally not allowed to do a primary search without the crew that is doing the search having a hose line. And I say that in some cases the extent of what I'm talking about is not just that, like, okay, Ford, you're on the fire floor and there's an engine up there with you. In some places that's not even good enough. In some places there might be an engine up there with you, but you still have to have a hand line on your ladder company. And some of these crews, we're not talking about 6-person ladder companies. We're talking about 2 or 3 person ladder companies. 2 or 3 guys going inside. What's everybody's thoughts on that? Bill, what do you got on that?
So,
Have you or Ford? Go ahead.
so I mean, a lot of us have worked in bigger places, and some of us I've worked in smaller places, and so now like I'm spoiled. You know what I mean? I've got a plethora of manpower that gets on the scene very quickly. So unprotected searches for us a lot of times they do happen, but there's always a hand line being stretched simultaneously while the search is going on. And if you want to say that primary has to happen with in conjunction with a hand line being deployed in rural USA, like I agree with that. You know what I mean? Like if you're arriving as the first due pumper and there's 3 people on that truck, then you do have to search off of a hand line, right? But to blatantly state that search doesn't happen unless there's water in the line, I don't. I think I disagree with it. You know what I mean? Because it's like in Colombia. If we pull up and we have confirmed entrapment or can see victims, we have the ability to go straight into rescue mode. You know what I mean? So we kind of just negate the fact that there's a hand line even there. We go straight to search and rescue.
Yeah, Bill, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree with Chris. I I guess I think that department may either have a bigger problem, like they have somebody that isn't in tune with today's fire service, or they're just in the deepest rural environment out there. And it's like, I want you to get in there and get it, but if something bad happens, at least you got the hose line. You know what I mean? And I feel like if you're doing, that's, a task related item and you're trying to do 2 task related items in one box on your tactical command board. It's like this unit is doing search and fire attack. I really feel like you're better off just putting the fire out, because you cannot, there's no way that, how do you decide which way to go, towards the fire or away from the fire? Are we going to knock the search out? I mean, obviously there are a lot of variables, but you inevitably end up going towards the fire if you are searching, mandatory search with a hose line in your department. But I feel like, and I would probably bend the rules on this too, if there's 2 or 3 people on that hose line, I would probably separate, If I can get the crew in place, I would say, you guys got it from here. I'm going to back out and maybe leapfrog a little bit, and that can pose a little bit of danger though too. It just depends on the skill level, I guess.
Well, so I think there's two different scenarios that we could be talking about, right? So one is kind of, Bill and Chris have both kind of talked about a little bit. All right, you're in a low staffed environment, or you're in an area where you have delayed arrival. All the fire trucks are getting there, a few minutes apart or whatever. And you pull up and you're on let's say a 3-person engine. You got a driver, an officer, and a firefighter, and it's John Wayne time. I mean, you're the only company on the scene. In that situation, I think, and Ford talked about it, I think you are in a situation where you might have to be a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. You might have to stretch the attack line and try to search off of it. And I think an important thing, and I think most people understand this, is like, that's where it kind of goes into the master of all trades, jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing, is that anytime you're trying to do two things at once, you're not doing either as effectively as you could if you were concentrating on one thing. So if you're trying to do the search and you're trying to do the fire attack simultaneously with the same people, with limited manpower, I mean, with this 3-person or 4-person crew, you're robbing from Peter to pay Paul. Both the search and the fire attack are suffering from that. But if that's all that's on scene, that might be what you have to do, right? But I think the more frustrating scenario that I've seen, because I've talked to departments, I've talked to large metro departments or urbanized departments where there are multiple companies on the scene. There's 2 engines and 2 trucks or whatever on the scene, and they're still making the crew that's doing a primary search drag the attack line with them. And quite frankly, I don't get that. 100% fire attack and search, they've got to go together, right? Doing the fire attack protects the search. It protects the victims, it protects the search, it buys you time to complete the search, particularly when you're searching for an unknown victim location, using oriented searches, and it's going to take you a minute, but there's some places where it's just like, you got to drag that line with you. Why? Just because. And I don't get that. Drew, you got anything to add? Oh, go ahead, Bill.
That's Chris.
Oh, Chris, go ahead.
Look, man, simplicity, I'm sitting here just thinking while we're talking about it, is our job's dangerous. You know what I mean? It's a risk that we take, and the citizens that we're swearing to protect or whatever, by delaying that just for our own selfish safety, if we will, by saying that we have to charge a hand line, it just doesn't make any sense to me. You know what I mean? It just I don't.
Well,
I don't
especially if
get
somebody
it.
else has hand lines. You know what I mean? If
Right.
like from our universe where we work with engine companies and ladder companies, like if the engine companies already have the hand lines in place, why would I make my truck companies drag a hand line also? Like, it's a totally different scenario if it's like, look, Ford, you got to go to the floor above and it's just you, so you better take a line. But if somebody else already has a line up there,
how much faster do I move without it? You know what I mean? It just truck companies and support companies or rescue companies, we inherently move much quicker than the engine company. Not because we're better, it's just we have less equipment to mess with. You know what I mean? So why would I slow myself down or slow the search down by having to worry about a hand line?
100%. Drew, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I got to drive the ladder truck back to the firehouse, so I got to hop off here. I'll jump back on when I can.
All right, yep, go ahead and concentrate on that. All right.
I can't imagine trying to search with the hose line and then be responsible for my own set of personal tools or something too. It's like, it's way too much going on.
Yeah.
You want me to go in there and search with the hose line? Then I probably need to drop some of this other stuff that I'm carrying.
Yeah, for good reason. Drew doesn't want to drive a fire truck and talk on the phone. How are we going to ask somebody to, attack the fire and do a search, with limited manpower at the same time? So, that it's an interesting issue, but I think in some tactical circles that's become like just the way they do it. And I think some of it is shrouded under the guise of safety, and I think some of it is, well, that's just what we do, just because, but I don't know that it makes sense. Now, I mean,
I can't imagine it being in an urban environment. and these are guys are going in there and actually being able to do that. They've got to be bending the rules somehow. Okay, chief, we're going to bring a line in there, but once they get inside, it's like, go.
I think that's what I think. I know. I'm pretty sure that's what the three of us would do.
Yeah,
I do think there are some. I think there's some companies that are trying to do it, and I think what's happening is the search is suffering. I think the search. I think unfortunately the search isn't what's happening, and/or it's happening very very slowly, right? But so we're talking trash on a little bit on the fire attack here. It seems like, but I want to come back and make sure that we emphasize that fire attack and search and ventilation, have to go hand in hand. I mean, would you guys agree? I mean, the best fire ground scenario is that we have the resources there and we have the coordination there, that fire attack, searches, and ventilation are all happening simultaneously, independently, and in a coordinated manner.
I agree. Yeah, it's a
I
perfect
agree.
world. I mean, you're gonna have to figure out which order that they need to kind of roll in, but yeah, I mean that would be great. It would be great to talk about perfect world scenarios, but typically you have us on here and you give us an ultimatum, which is like, I don't know which one to do, fire attack
Well,
or
that
search. It's tough.
well that's I mean that's the thing. Like you're saying, that's the perfect scenario, and I'm spoiled that I have that most of the fires that I run. However, let's revert back to what we're talking about, delaying the search. That in rural America, your prioritization of duties is do what's the priority? Is it ventilation? Is it search? Is it fire attack? You gotta make that choice. And most of the time, or probably 90% of the time, I'm going to choose search. You know what I mean? Like I'm going after the targeted area. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So
Oh
it
yeah.
it's a laundry list that you have to go down very quickly.
I think that's a great point. So and we've been in some of these conversations before. I think that two there's a lot of things. Obviously, one of the biggest things about truck company work is that there's so much to do and there's so little people, and it all becomes about scenario and prioritize, right? You got to analyze the scenario and then you got to prioritize based on the scenario. But two of the most common things that seem to be competing for a truck company's attention initially are vertical ventilation and the search. So, what are your thoughts?
This if you place yourself not in Columbia or DC and you have time in between units, there's no doubt in my mind that search comes before vent. That's just, I don't know. I feel like I've regurgitated that a bunch, but I'm more comfortable in an underventilated fire because I'm not afraid of the backdraft or the smoke explosion. I would be more afraid of a ventilated fire that happened too early before things kind of got in line with the fire attack. It's just, I don't know. I feel like in today's world, we ventilate. We're already ventilating a little early. We make some kick-ass Instagram videos with Metallica in the background, but the footage shows a ball of fire, and it's like, I don't know, man. I feel like when you do that in rural America, you put all your eggs in the engine's basket, and the engine in the fire attack unfortunately come with some of the most common fireground problems out there, and it has to do with water. So if you choose ventilation before search, you as I see, what do you do? You're like, oh, they definitely cut a little early, that's okay, but I really just hope that some of the most common problems that happen on a fireground don't happen to me today. Water supply issues, too short of a line, kinks, hoarding conditions. It's like, definitely should have put our more bodies in the door and waited on the vent side. I understand you can weigh the lean and lift and all the aspects of it, but we're not talking about DC. We're talking about somewhere where it's like, who the next unit is coming, what do they do? And it's definitely going to be search for me because you can get them out if they need to, and vent is kind of irreversible. If you overdo it, you overdo it, and that's it. And then what you can't search on that anymore.
Yeah, and I think and I want to hear Ford's thoughts on this too, because I know the three of us and some other friends have kicked this ball around a couple times. But and that's what you're saying when you say it's not. You're talking about departments that aren't DC or aren't Columbia or whatever. That's not that really doesn't even refer to like, okay, they're the type of operations or things like that. But what we mean is in the environments we've worked in, and because all of us have, we've all worked together, or I've worked with everybody here, we put a large first alarm assignment on scene pretty quickly, where you got trucks that coming in simultaneously, and in almost any tactical scenario where the possible answer to the question of what to do is to do everything right now. Well, that's the right answer. If you have the resources to do everything right now, problem solved. Do that. But the greater majority of fire departments out there are, they're pulling up to a fire that needs 20 things done, and they're showing up with 10 people. And when you got more things that need to be done than you have people to do it right now, that's where you got to get into that prioritization kind of thing. Ford, what are your thoughts on that?
So the disclaimer is up front before I say what I'm going to say is I am a huge advocate and I'm very aggressive with when it comes to vertical ventilation. I am 100% with that. But my stance on it is, sometimes people say, oh, we could have done this a little bit better, or, maybe next time this. No, it's a 50-50. You either 50% make it better or you 50% make it worse when you're choosing to vent. Now, I get it. Like, we create time and space until you run out of time and space. So you got to be able to make the appropriate call. And, we keep beating the dead horse of, in the perfect world, if we got hand lines stretched. But I've been on fires before where hand lines have been stretched and flowing water and ventilation, aggressive ventilation happening simultaneously. And what does the truck do, right? We move faster than the hand lines, right? So what do? We keep extending, 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 and moving and moving and moving until we burn the roof off. So you got to slow down a little bit. I want you to be aggressive. I want you to get up and cut a hole, and I want you to get the big high five when you get down for a job well done, not a job not done well. But the thing is, slow down a little bit. Like, be prepared. Like, you know, I talk with Blake all the time, and he's right. Like, you should be preparing to vent when you leave the firehouse, because if you're not anticipating to do it, then you're behind the eight ball. But you got to pump the brakes and make sure that that's the appropriate tactic of choice. You know what I mean? Because it's that laundry list of the prioritization of duties, and you got to choose the right ones.
Yeah. Well, Drew,
It's,
this
I
is
think
right
it's,
up your alley. Because unless things have changed drastically, as the truck driver, I mean, one of your primary jobs is ventilation, probably mostly, a lot vertical, right? And you're leading that outside team of your truck company, right? I mean, so what are your kind of thoughts? We're kind of talking about you pull up and there's kind of this, like, I feel like the things that a truck company competes with is that if you don't have enough people right now to do everything, the two big decisions that we're competing with is the search and the vent. And so how do
Right.
you kind of prioritize that, or what are your thoughts on that? I mean, if everybody doesn't show up all at once, what are you thinking?
I mean, the more things that we can get done concurrently rather than consecutively, one after the other, right? The truck company has a long list of tasks at every fire. The items on that list never change. Every fire we go to, no matter if it's a one-story ranch or a high rise, right? The tasks are the same. The order of operation in which we attack those will change at any given fire. So prioritizing between search and vent, those are really two of those things that I want to happen simultaneously. Um, I guess it comes down to staffing and the response that you have, right? I'm lucky enough where we throw a ton of people at every fire, right? And we're getting 2 trucks initially, 5 engines, a rescue squad. So there's plenty of people. Um, and like you said, my job primarily revolves around the outside duties. I'm going to throw a couple ladders, and if it's called for, right, if vertical ventilation is higher in that list at that fire, I'm going to go straight to the roof and get a hole. We might start with some horizontal ventilation and then move on and turn that into a vertical vent.
Yeah.
But it's all priority based. You have to look at the situation you're dealt with, and all right, which of these items in that checklist are moving up to the top?
Yeah. Well, and I think, our friend Bull said something earlier about always and nevers don't work well in the fire service, and that's true. And I think it's wise to remember because, just talking with people, a lot of people around the country, there are some people that, they always go to the roof or they never go to the roof, right? And there are some fire departments out there that everybody goes to the roof and like nobody goes inside, and there are some departments that are vice versa. And I think that putting all of your eggs in one basket one way or the other, or operating in a manner where your company or your department or you personally always does the same thing at every fire, well, you're going right against what you said, Drew, which is totally true. Every fire might have the same list of things that needs to get done, but it's the order of operations. It's the prioritization during the scenario. And if you're not, adjusting that order of operations based on your size up in the scenario in front of you, well, I mean, there's a good chance you're not doing the most effective thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, we went to a little fire last tour. It was on the apartment on the second floor of a 3-story building. Me cutting a hole in that roof isn't going to do a bit of good,
yeah,
right? So that got bumped way down on that priority checklist. No, we still sent one person up to pop the roof hatch over the stairwell, but instead of going straight to the roof, throw more ground ladders.
yep, yep, 100%. And I had a fire one time, and I'll leave some of the details out, but it was a fairly standard early morning fire in a 1-story house. It was a really good fire. I mean, a lot of fire. No further information. I mean, just regarding people in particular. No real information about whether anybody was in there or not in there. And the outside team had received reports that there was fire in the attic, and I think that led them to kind of focus more on a vertical ventilation thing. Bottom line is they never really got a hole in the roof, and to be honest, I don't really think we needed a hole in the roof. And then later, there were 2 victims found inside of the room that was right next to where they were operating on the outside to make the roof. And where, had we VES'd those rooms early, we would have gotten hands on those victims much, much quicker. We did find and remove both of those victims. The inside team did, but it was a little bit later on. And I think honestly at that fire, there was too much of a focus on vertical ventilation that was marginally needed, if not needed at all. And the early VES opportunity was missed. You know what I'm saying? And that's a very unfortunate scenario. But when we talk about fires like that, and all of us have been on, I've been on fires with rescues with everybody here, and so we know some of the best lessons learned about searches, I think, come from stories. Come from the fireground experiences, and sometimes where things didn't go so well, and sometimes a lot of people don't want to talk about times when an error was made or when a lesson was learned, because it's frustrating or it's embarrassing or you don't want a black eye or whatever. But I learned stuff. I learned from stuff that went well, but I really learned from stuff that didn't go well. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if I'm the only one like that, but I think it's important to talk about stuff like that.
I think you
Yeah,
just need to be prepared if you chose vent that things could lean in the favor of getting worse before they get better. And you should have the appropriate amount of people there in case they do. And maybe that means that you have at least 2 hand lines deployed. You know what I mean? Like if it's show up and there's 1 engine, you show up in the ladder company and that you know that they're in there. To go vent is like, oh, you could really be pushing the ball there. And one thing that we learned, and I was driving Chris and we went to an apartment fire, and um, it was kind of one of those backup and punts. Dispatch was basically telling us we're on the phone with somebody that needs to be rescued, and there was a column for 2 miles, so it's cranking. You know what I mean? And I believe he told me what to do when we got there, but I already knew that I was going to cut the roof off this entire place while he went in there and tried to get them. And so that's what happened. I mean, there had to have been 150 to 200 square feet of roof open. It was an enclosed stairwell. It's Briargate, Chris. Opened up the stairwell as best I could, basically stripped it out, started to vent. You turn around, it's just like, holy shit, that's nothing but fire. They got the victim out. Guess what happened? Code red. There's just too much exposed fire. We exposed way too much, but we accomplished the task of getting the person out, but we also had to write off the building. And so it's, it's just one of those things where it's like, everybody should know that if we're in that situation and there's 4 or 5 Sawyers on the roof, they are gonna make things worse faster than they can extinguish from the inside. You're just not as fast as me on the inside. And it goes back to searching with a hose line. You're just not as quick, right? And so you can't put out my exhaust. It just can't happen. So it's one of those things where you really have to weigh those options. And if vent is the way to go, then you may have to change tactics after that's over with, or be prepared for it.
Yeah.
Elaborating on that particular fire that Bill's talking about too, is we had, like he said, it was a very well advanced fire already by the time we got there, and we had, I'm going to speak on the pros of ventilation at the time, and we elected to burn that building down to save 2 lives, and I'll do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. But the problem became is fire attack at that particular time was not even on our radar, right? We had 100% went into rescue mode and event for life tactic, right? So we went into that mode, went in. We had hand lines with us, but it was nothing more to protect us. It wasn't anything to extinguish fire by any means, right? We were venting for life. We were trying to get everything up and out to be able to achieve what we did, right? And I would do it, like I said, I'd do it again tomorrow. And I said that's speaking on the benefit of very aggressive ventilation, and just knowing when to apply that is key.
Yeah. One
Nick,
hundred.
can I answer one of Emily's comments?
Yeah. Go ahead.
One of her comments, it says, do most departments rotate position assignments other than driver officer? I'll go back to when I was working in Columbia. We did that all the time. All the time. Chris went from captain to firefighter. Still the captain of the truck, but his assignment changed on the power board. Everything changed. And we actually benefited from it a lot, because anytime he was off the seat, we would catch a fire. So it would be at least two or three times a month where we were rotating, and absolutely we did that.
Yeah. And I think that's a great thing, and we do that here. I mean, we kind of take it to the next level. Is we have people, firefighters and engineers, that are qualified to be an acting officer. Firefighters that are qualified to be acting drivers, whatever. And so we provide the freedom to our members that as long as the person that's in the seat, that's whether it's the driver's seat, officer seat, or back seat, whatever, is qualified to do the job, I don't care what their rank is, right? And so what I do with that is, we routinely have a captain that's like, hey man, I'm gonna ride the irons today, and I'm gonna let my backstep guy that's an acting officer get some officer time, and I'm gonna let this guy get some acting driver time. And a lot of departments don't do that. Like, if the captain's working, the captain's riding the seat, and that's cool, and I get that. But what I've kind of seen with some of the acting officer positions and stuff like that is that a lot of those guys, they might not get a lot of play time, right? Like, they might not get a lot of time to be the officer, because maybe their regular officer never takes days off or whatever, and so that person's not really getting an opportunity to sharpen their skill. And so what we kind of do there is, if the captain jumps in the back and the guy in the back is riding the seat, well, they're going to be on the inside team anyway. So the captain is going to be with the other guy, and what better way for that guy to get mentored? You know what I'm saying? So, but I think also the person asking that comment was also kind of implying a little bit, do we rotate between engine and truck? Do the truck firefighters rotate to the engine, and the engine firefighters rotate to the truck? What are your thoughts on that?
Who, me?
I know
It didn't
Drew's thoughts
happen.
on it.
You could certainly do it. Running things by the battalion, he would be, I guess, if that's what you want to do, you know what I mean? But if they're, sometimes a lot of departments, the support companies or the truck companies, they exercise in like different types of classes. So it can be difficult in that manner. But if it was eye for eye and everybody was in agreement, I mean, it could certainly go down that way. It doesn't happen that often.
Yeah. So another topic that's I think become hotly discussed lately, and some are very much in favor of it, and some are not in favor of it, is VES and searching beyond the door. And so what I mean by that, just to set the stage for discussion, is, of course, in traditional VES, you take the window, you go in the window, you isolate, close the door. Maybe, a lot of us would probably like maybe hook the door with our foot or something like that, and like body length sweep into the hallway or whatever, maybe. And then, but basically you close the door and then search that room, and then you would go back out the window and move on to the next window, right? And so that's traditional VES, as everybody knows it. But in a lot of circles, it's become a discussion point that, like, well, once I VES, why don't I just continue out the door into the hallway and do the other rooms, almost as if we were just using that window as, the front door. What are everybody's thoughts on that?
Well, I'll
No,
start.
I'll back
So,
you up.
that's one. I'm going to try to be a grown up about it, but VES. Why do we choose VES? Number one, what were the conditions why we chose to do VES initially? Right? Was it fire through the roof? Was there only one room tenable? Was there someone in the front yard saying that they're in that room right there? Is that the reason we chose to do VES? And if I do VES and I continue past the door, then I've just chosen an alternate means of egress. You know what I mean? Like, I chose to go in through the window to do a primary search. If you're going to do that and you're going to go beyond the door, then we just call it VEP, is vent enter primary is what you're going to be doing. You know what I mean? And it's no different than going in the alpha front door versus going in a window and continue search. Now, I will say this with leniency is, yeah, if you're in a one-story ranch that's 1,200 square feet and you can reach an adjacent room from the bedroom you're in, like, yeah, maybe sweep it real quick, sweep the length of the hallway. But the whole point of VES is to be able to compartmentalize and search that room, you know what I mean, and get back out and go on to the next room and the next room, next room. I'm not a big advocate and or a fan of searching beyond the door.
Bill, I know we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, I'm not either. And my reason is because I tried to reserve that term over the radio as much as I can, because I really think that if I tell command that I'm going to VES, it's telling him more than what I'm trying to do. It opens up a tactical worksheet for him. It says, if Bill's telling me that he's going to VES on the Charlie Bravo, conditions are really shitty. And maybe I should stretch a line over there just for shits and giggles, or provide him more support or equipment or something. And so to be able to say that you VES'd and went beyond the door, I think is a kind of misappropriation of that term. Because if you're VESing, you can't go beyond the door because conditions theoretically really wouldn't allow you to. We're talking about the thickest and the nastiest stuff, and I need to go in and come out, going in with the radio report and coming out and say, hey, we're good. Conditions were, we got somebody, or it was negative. So for me, I agree with Chris with VEP, a lot of times it's just VEP, you don't even say anything. You're just hopping in the window. There's already 15 people that went in through the front door. Awesome. It's another means of ingress and egress. But for me, if I say VES, I'm changing a little bit of the dynamic. RIT should be alerted. What's going on here? You know what I mean? So I think it's a high priority term that should be used somewhat responsibly.
What do you think,
Well,
Andrew?
not
Or go ahead.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Ford.
Well, I mean, just kind of piggybacking on that, and you know, like Bill was saying, like if the conditions are so bad that you had to choose to do VES because there was only a couple tenable spots, if you're going in and decide to continue past that door, how are you? If you're not closing the door, compartmentalized, how are you adversely affecting the fire? You know what I mean? Like, what are you? How are you making it worse? You know what I mean? Like if the whole thing is about compartmentalization and being able to search a targeted space, like are you essentially making it worse by just kind of moving through the building? Or Nick, you're always in the car a lot of times with the guys watching. If I announce over the radio that I'm VES in this particular space and I don't come back out of this space and 30, 45 seconds later that room flashes, where do you think I'm at?
Yeah, in that room.
In
Yeah.
that in that room, right? Like, but no, I'm good because I walked out the front door. You know what I mean? Like, I'd expect you to come chew my ass afterwards. You know what I mean? Because I just was basically freelancing inside of the house.
What are you thinking, Drew?
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, and I've actually been the guy that runs the search culture page. It's Justin
McWilliams.
McWilliams. Talks a lot about this. I actually like a lot of his points. So VES to me is a very, very isolated. Not that we need to add the I in there. That shit's dumb. But targeted search, right? I roll up and mom's in the front yard going, my baby is in that window right there, that room. And I know I can reach them by performing VES faster than that interior crew is going inside. Or I know that that interior search team, that my inside team is going to be delayed by fire conditions, right? And I know I can access a farther point in that building, an upper floor, something like that, faster. Or like Bill and Chris said, fire conditions are so bad throughout the majority of the building. We've identified this searchable space, this one room, these two rooms, wherever it may be. So you're on the clock, right? It's not. I don't care if you just go in the window to do a search, right? Hey, the stairwell was clogged up, and my interior team said, hey, we're going to go in this window because that's where we want to start our search from. Well, fine, I don't care, and you can cover the entire floor, but that's not VES, right? So differentiate between the two. If you're going to go far beyond the door and go into other rooms down the hallway, around the corner, wherever, you're not doing VES. We need to keep that term like to what it truly is there. I don't have the time due to the fire conditions, right? Or whatever other factors. I think I can make this room really quick and get the hell out. I'm going to close that door to buy myself time. I'm all about, before you close that door, sweep the hallway, a body length search out into the hallway. I'd hate to slam that door shut and then come to find out later there's a victim on the other side of that door. They tried to make it out and got overcome by smoke and dropped, 4 feet out in the hallway away from their bedroom, right? That wouldn't sit well with me. So do that body length search, close the door, do your search and get out. And again, this is kind of determined by staffing, but a lot of times VES is a one-man operation. So, um, not saying I haven't gone off on my own a time or two before. If it weren't for freelancing, I'd do no lancing at all. Um, but that's not good for the overall operation, right? Like if I go down, no one knows where I am to come help.
Yeah.
Or I do find a victim, right? I went beyond the door. I went to the next room down and I find a victim. Well, now no one knows where the hell I am to come help me get them out, right?
That's a
That's the other
great point.
caveat to VES. Like it's typically a one-man operation doing the search, right? Maybe one more on the ladder if you have them available. Again, staffing dependent. But go ahead and try and lift a 175-pound human being out of a window by yourself. Oh, and who's going to receive them on the ladder, right? You need someone there too.
Yeah.
So, like the VES is a very niche tactic, right? There's some factors that got to be hit for me to say yes, this is what I'm doing, right? Or I'm going to VES. Um, Otherwise, you're just starting a primary search from a window, right? If I open the front door to a house, I'm creating ventilation. I cross the threshold, I'm entering, and I'm going to search. Well, it's no different from me cracking a window and going in that and starting my primary search, right? No difference in that. And I'm totally for that, right? If that's the most advantageous position to start your primary search of whatever floor and whatever building you're in, cool, go do it. But don't call it VES.
Yeah, I think everybody's hit on a lot of great points, and I think we go back to what somebody said is like we're looking at why are we VESing, right? And there's two reasons that I would look at and say why we're VESing, right? Is so one of the kind of the adages that I always kind of promote is we want when we're searching, we want to take the path that is the fastest path to the known or suspected victim location, right? So we either know or we think that this is where the victim is, and if the fastest path is to go through the window, then VES is the thing. And that could be because of fire conditions, it could be because of forcible entry challenges, it could just be because the fire's on the first floor or in the front of the house and everybody's jammed up at the front door. I mean, you all know that log jam. And so it might be like, hey, we're going to go in through the window. Okay, so that's the one scenario. The other scenario is conditions based, right? Is that maybe it's the low manpower situation we talked about earlier, and you don't effectively have enough people to get a good fire attack going on and do this space. Well, anytime we do an oriented searches are, almost always by definition much longer than VESs because you're searching the entire floor plan of at least one floor and kind of just starting at point A and going all the way to point Z, just feeling your way around. When you're doing a VES, you're in a much smaller space and it's just faster done, right? So, whenever we go for that oriented search, if there is not good water on the fire, if we don't have a line on the fire, then what's happening the entire time we're doing the oriented search is that the fire is growing. And I'm sure I'm not the only one on this phone call or watching it that's been driven out of a building in the middle of a search because because conditions deteriorated. And what that means when conditions deteriorate is the fire got bigger. You know what I mean? And we couldn't continue the search. So if we don't support the fire attack, we're not going to be able to continue that search. And I say all that to say is that my biggest concern about search beyond the door is that the person making that decision does not know if we have water on the fire and does not know if the water is on the fire in a location and in a manner that is going to protect the searcher when they go beyond the door, right? The other half of the conversation, if it gets you to places and people quicker, that's all good, right? But you've got to make sure that when you leave that door, that you're going to be in a protected environment. And the classic example where you could get caught in a really bad spot is being on an upper floor, say the second floor of a house. You VES the second floor front bedroom. You're like, I got this. I'm gonna make the rear bedroom. And fire's on the first floor. You leave the bedroom. You're in the hallway. Something happens on the first floor. Maybe the line's no good. Maybe the fire takes off, comes up the interior stairway, and it overtakes you and cuts you off from your exit. And like Drew was talking about, nobody knows you're there. They think if anything, they think you were in the room, right? But they don't know that you're there. And so I think, that searching beyond the door could be a viable tactic if you happened to know everything else that was going on. But I also think that it's in many situations you don't know everything else that's going on. If I had done a 360 myself and I was paying really good attention to the radio and the engines were doing a really good job about calling water on the fire and fire knockdown over the radio, if I had that kind of information, I might feel in a really good place to go beyond the door. But I think in a lot of places, people are going beyond the door and they have no idea if there's water on the fire. They have no idea what the configuration of the building is and where their next egress is. And nobody knows where they are. Nobody knows that they've gone beyond the door. And I think that adding a couple of those things up are a recipe for disaster. I don't know. Am I off base? What do you guys think?
So spot on.
I thought you might say that.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think going beyond the door opens yourself up to a lot, and you got to look at it in how what your staffing is, how many people you have dedicated to this task, right? Are you doing it by yourself, or do you have a partner there with you, or more, right? Is it a team or whatever? This actually came up in conversation here with my guys not too long ago, because we've got a rookie and he's getting kind of turned over in all the different positions, and we're talking about VES, and kind of the way we run it is while we're nowhere near short staff, we've got plenty of bodies. I'm pretty sure with the amount of people we put on scene in short order, if we just all walked into the fire department and We just displace all the air and snuff the fire out, and sometimes that's what we do. But just how we break our tasks down, I have two people going in on the inside team, right? They're our interior search team. That leaves me, the other technician, and our hook man on the outside. So my hook man is going to help us with some outside tasks until I don't need him anymore. Cut him loose. He goes and meets up with the interior team, and I go to the roof. If VES is called for, right, some of those conditions that I talked about earlier are met for me, that hookman and I are throwing ladders together right off the break. That's the first thing we do, right? If VES is truly called for, it's probably going to be one of those first tasks we take on, and it's time sensitive. So we're doing that together initially, but I'm coming off a ladder truck as you see me now, right? This is how I drive. So we're throwing ladders. We identify, hey, I want you to VES that room right there. And as soon as that ladder is thrown, he's going up and I'm boogieing back to the truck to get dressed. So now we do have to make a radio transmission to command telling him, hey, we're VESing and where. But the way we do it there, now I have a little bit more accountability over that guy, right? I know one person could search a room by himself, right? But it's if he gets hemmed up or, hey, he does find a victim, right? This thing actually worked out as intended. You're going to need help to get that victim out.
Yeah.
So where the chief heard him say, hey, I'm VESing, the Bravo side, second floor, I know exactly what window I put him in, right? I know which ladder he went up. I know what window he's in. I know exactly where he is. So if I don't hear from him in a reasonable amount of time, I know exactly where to go look for him.
Right.
If I do hear him on the radio, like, hey, truck 16 hook, I've got a victim, second floor bedroom, I know exactly which one he's in. I know exactly where to go help him remove that victim. Now, if your game plan is a little bit different and you go with the traditional model, if you will, of VES, where one dude's searching and the other is at the tip of the ladder, kind of as that anchor point and waiting to receive a victim, and that guy inside goes, hey, I really think we can make this hallway, we can make the next room down, we really need to do it. Well, if that other person can hop in that window and now you've got a team of two, you can update command or update your officer or the other team working inside or whoever you need to. Okay, now it's not just you off running around by yourself. You've updated command or whoever you need to so they have some more accountability of you. Okay, do it then. But again, we need to keep in mind the conditions of why we decided to VES in the first place. Was it just because we had a report of someone trapped in that room and they got that wrong and the conditions are still okay? Or did I choose to VES because the conditions are deteriorating in the rest of the house or apartment, wherever, and I thought I could get in there really quick. And now if I go beyond, I'm running that timer out.
Drew,
And
Drew made,
go ahead, Ford.
Drew made a great point, Nick, when he was talking about having a team of two come up if the partner thinks that he can move on past that. Just the change in status to IC is paramount, right? You got to come across the radio and give that change in status. Like if you started with VES and you're going to change tactics and move on to whether we want to call it a primary or whatever we're going to call it, but that radio transmission has to happen. And I think, when Drew said that, like, I can't agree with him anymore than if you just put it across the radio, just simplicity. I know a lot of people don't want to talk on the radio and tie up radio traffic, but just, a simple change of status, we'll be going to XYZ location. And once you get a copy, I mean, you're basically free range to do what you want.
Yeah, that would be my advice as well. Is I do think it's a good idea. I mean, from the command perspective or whatever, that if you're going to VES, that they make that transmission. Ladder 1 OB command, VES in second floor, Alpha Bravo corner. Okay, and I write that on my board. I have one around here somewhere, but I have a little spot on. I mean, a little right for a place for writing notes, and I would just write Ladder 1 OV. VES, second floor AB, and I abbreviate that a little bit. But then when they call me and they say it's clear, then I would just cross that out, and that tells me they're out of the building. But it would be a simple transmission, ladder 1 OV, to command. We have tenable conditions on the second floor. we are going to search the rest of the second floor while we're in here. And then I'll either say yes or no. And I mean, if it looks like it's the right thing to do, then I would err towards giving them the green light. But I mean, I think it's important, that be communicated. There are some times where it's a necessary tactic. I remember, I don't remember what street it was, but it was in January a few years ago, in the Dentsville area, and we pulled up. It was a first shift fire, so I don't remember if either of you guys were there. But I mean, 3 townhomes going, and there was a known victim entrapment on the second floor end unit. And I mean, when I say going, I mean top to bottom, front to back, and probably the only reason they were in the original fire building was the known entrapment. And so, bottom line, the stairs were way burnt out. And I know everybody's thing is like, well, throw a ladder over them. Well, that works really good quickly when you have some visibility, when you're not being ate up by fire, and when the stairs don't make a 180-degree turn off a landing. But that's what was going on at this fire, so that wasn't an option. And then guys were trying to, on a townhome, you've only got you've got limited windows. Now, fortunately, this was an end unit, so there was a Bravo side exposed, but there were no windows on the Bravo side, and then the Delta was, of course, attached. Well, they go in the Alpha side second floor window, and the floor was trash. I mean, they tried to VES from the front and make it in through this window, and the floor was just trash. And but ultimately, they ended up bringing an attack line up the ladder through the window, supporting the search, and kind of basically, at that point, then they dominated the second floor, and they finished searching, and they ultimately found the guy. But at that point, that has moved from a VES to transforming the second floor window into an attack point. You know what I'm saying? It might as well have been a door, and because we're taking an attack line through there to support the search with the fire attack. And to me, if that's what we're doing, if we're taking a line through the window, maybe in a scenario like that, well, in that case, of course, we're going beyond the door, because we've addressed the problem about why we would isolate. We isolate because of fire behavior. But if the engine company came with me and brought an attack line, we handled that. You know what I mean? I don't know if either of you guys remember that fire or that scenario, but what are your thoughts on that?
I think that would work perfect. I mean, but you just like you said, you're changing it completely from in and out quickly to in and continuing in. And Justin had asked something kind of similar. He had asked about compounding the search, primary search coupled with VES, that you meet in the middle. I mean, personally, I kind of stand where I said, if I'm going to VES, the middle for me is going to be the middle of that room. I'm probably not likely to meet the primary search crew because they're not where I'm at, because I have to go in this way and I have to likely go out the way that I came in. So it can happen. I've been interrupted and just said, hey, we're doing a VES. But it is what it is. But I think, yeah, if you're gonna reattach people to that and basically send a task force up there and have extinguishment capabilities, then you're free to go.
Yeah, and I mean, so that's kind of obvious. That's an uncommon scenario. That's a kind of unique scenario there,
Mm-hmm.
Based on the entrapment and based on the tenability conditions and all that kind of stuff. Um, but another thing, kind of, I think worth talking about is a lot of the conversation we're talking about when we VES. Are you guys VESing often? Our guys VES all the time. I mean, a lot. Now we send 3 service companies, 2 ladder companies, and a heavy rescue on fires, and they all, on a residential fire, 3 stories or below, they all split into inside or outside teams. So there's usually quite a bit of staffing. We're fortunate. There's a good bit of staffing on the outside where a lot of those outside tasks can happen. But one of the things we find is that VES is often very valuable, and it's not something that we're just doing in an extreme situation with terrible fire conditions, but oftentimes it's just the fastest way to get into targeted locations. What are your guys' thoughts? Is it something you're doing all the time, or something rarely, or what?
It's few and far between. I mean, it happens. I say that with leniency. I mean, it happens a good bit in Columbia. I mean, people are still aggressively VES, and more so along the lines of from the targeted standpoint, I would say so. Than just an alternate means of getting into the building, sort of say. But definitely, I would say more so if conditions don't permit, your traditional entry, then we're going to go with that. But VES for Columbia would be more so on the lines. It definitely is a targeted search. Conditions are shitty, and that's what we've chosen to go with.
Yeah. Bill?
Yeah, I mean, when I was on the truck in Columbia, I felt like I had other duties that I wanted to secure, and it's not that I would bypass an opportunity to VES, but we were fortunate enough to be backed by a good rescue company in a lot of the jurisdictions, so they would handle a lot of that, and I would support them and try and keep myself on the outside. Um, I always say that the big three for me is fire attack, search, and egress, and the inside crew can handle the search. Fire attack is obviously belongs to the engine or sometimes whoever picks up the nozzle. But I really wanted everybody to feel that when I was outside vent or the chauffeur, that you could pick any window in that building and come out and you're going to meet a ladder.
Mm.
And so, I know we'll talk about ladders and stuff like that here shortly, but for me, it was strongly targeted for that room in and out. And it's situation dependent. Hey, there's 5 kids inside. It's like, all right, that's going to
Yeah.
change things.
I mean, we've kind of developed over time here a pretty elaborate matrix of operations that we look for the outside team to do. And on a residential fire, the first outside vent team member, most of the time, their primary job is going to be basically below the roof work. And the first thing really the first thing they're looking for is a VES opportunity. And we say that because we want that to be the first thing they're looking for, because if there is a VES opportunity, that's the thing to do. And I've kind of said that, based on some experiences. One of the stories I told earlier, where there could have been a VES opportunity and it was missed, and therefore there was delayed access to a victim because we were focused on other things. I mean, I think we're all in the same boat, that the number one thing we're looking for is on the fires to save lives. You guys talked about Briargate burning down the building to save 2 people, and how at the end of the day that's a win, and that's correct. And so I want them to look for that VES opportunity. And then the next thing they're looking for after the VES opportunity is horizontal ventilation, right? So again, we're talking about a residential building, 3 stories or below. Their priority is basically VES, horizontal ventilation, egress, and then getting into the utilities. And we kind of look at that from the reverse thing, is like, I don't want to be focusing on utilities if egress needs to be done. I don't want to be focusing on egress if ventilation should be done. And I don't want to be focusing on that if there should be a VES. And so, to clarify, when I say egress, you might need to do egress to do either ventilation or search. I need to throw a ladder, or I need to take these window bars or whatever. That might be part of doing ventilation or doing a primary search or doing a VES. When I talk about egress as its own category, I talk about that kind of as the extras. Like, okay, let me throw all the extra ladders. Let me go get all the extra, bars or egress issues or whatever. We want to get to those, but just in most cases, I think not at the expense of initial horizontal ventilation if we're ready for that, and VES opportunities. And so that's kind of what the priorities of that first outside team member are for us. And then the matrix, and there's tools assignments that go on for us. For us, it's appropriate length ladder, and sometimes, a lot of times, that's the VES ladder, those shorter ladders, and a hook and a bar. And that's like the primary tool complement that's going to help them get that done. And then the second OV member, that arrives, is going to be kind of getting ready to go to the roof kind of thing. And so their tool complement is going to be a next appropriate ladder, appropriate saw, and some kind of breaching tool. I mean, whether that's an axe or a pig, or you guys know as well as I do, everybody has their favorite tool to bust a hole in a roof, but something that'll work if the axe does, or if the saw doesn't start, kind of thing, to finish up a hole or something like that. But that's kind of our initial workflow. What are your guys' thoughts on that, or what are the workflows you guys are used to?
I think I'll jump ahead of you, Chris. I think it's area dependent, and you can bring up Columbia again. You could have terrible areas that are loaded with window bars, and then you can go 5 miles down the road and meet new construction. And I think, in Chris's area specifically, as the OV guy, I've had a lot of things that I could be doing and that weren't necessarily VES. Obviously, that was still on my list, and I'm pro VES, of course. But it's also just depends. Is it an attached garage fire? Is it fire in two out of the three bedrooms? Things are always going to be dynamically changing, and I always wanted to at least tackle. For me, I would run VES as a targeted search in and out, knowing that the inside crew is going to be in there. And I would also be focused on a lot of egress things. So I had plenty of window bars, plenty of cages, a lot of things I could handle, in at least at that truck's position.
Ford?
There's a lot of different things, a lot of different variables, like Bill was talking about, and it all, I hate to use the cop out as situation and scene dependent, but it really does differ between one story mom and pop ranch style to a multifamily dwelling. Because if I pull up on an apartment fire, and my priorities are going to be a little bit different, but we don't, on the trucks, we don't want to so much moth to the flame, if you will, because yeah, I am concerned where the fire's at right now, but I want to forecast to where it's going to be. So if there's a tremendous amount of egress issues around the building, and depending on how fast the fire is moving, whatever is going to greatly be dependent on the tactic that I choose. And is egress more important than ventilation, or is ventilation more important? And I am spoiled to have a very aggressive, very smart, very effective rescue company that comes with us on a lot of fires, that's there at the same time we are. And we'll flip flop a lot of times. We'll flip flop in delegation of duties to, like, who's going to handle egress and who's going to handle ventilation. A lot of times on 1-story houses, rescue may be on the roof before I can even get off the truck. You know what I mean? So I have no problem with my guys grabbing a saw and handle the egress issues, because once again, I am an advocate for vertical ventilation, but I am a huge proponent of egress over ventilation a lot of times, because I don't want that to be a problem well into the fire.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of times it could be duplication of efforts. If you're in that scenario with what just I guess what Chris just said, and rescue beats them, and they go 2 in 2 out, riding 4. They got 2 in and 2 out on the roof. There's really no need to accompany them on the roof at that point either. So I mean, you could dump 6 inside, or run 4 inside and 2 run a VES. I mean, and it's predetermined in Columbia. That's how they do that. And, you all know that, but the outside vent team on the second due support company links up with the first due support. So if you can predetermine that ahead of time and say, hey, we're going to go cut, why don't y'all just go all in?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or do something
Well,
else.
and one thing, both of you kind of, what you're talking about highlights, I think what all three of us are talking about highlights, is that we're all talking about departments that, are lucky or smart enough to send enough people to have a lot of people to throw at the truck work. You know what I mean? Whether it's the inside or the outside truck work. And it just really makes you think, like, when we travel around the country and you talk to different departments, and they're going to fires with, maybe 1 3-person ladder truck. And some of them are going to fires in pretty big buildings, even pretty big houses, the New England triple deckers, the New England 2.5 frames, and they're going with some departments going with 1 3-person truck. And, here we are, and we're kind of like hemming and hawing about how we're going to take, like, 9 to 12 people and handle all this truck
3
work. And they're trying to
supports.
do how you're going to do the same thing with 3 people is beyond me. And the answer is you're not. You're gonna pick what you're not going to do at that point. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts? I mean, if the run cards are still the same, at a house fire in Columbia, you're getting, 1 ladder and 1 rescue in addition to the 3 engines. But on an apartment fire, you're getting 2 ladders and a rescue. Now, obviously, you go to some of the larger apartment complexes, it's a totally different thing. But you guys know we would get dispatched to an apartment fire and get 2 ladders and a rescue, and it was basically, a small house that was cut up into apartments. So how did you guys feel being on the ladder companies there? How did your how did your workflow change, when you were going from a one engine, one rescue response to a two ladder, one rescue response?
Mhm.
I mean,
And
other than there being like, if it was, well, say they're like similar building sizes. I get that it's very different when you're talking about a much larger apartment building.
well, I
That
mean,
third support would run. Oh, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
if you're talking about a smaller footprint, it benefits us tremendously because it slows everything down. I mean, the tasks are still being done, but with that much personnel on that smaller occupancy type, don't disregard people. Just achieve the task, all at one time. But it kind of slows down the operation. Everybody is being a little bit more situationally aware, and they're being able to achieve it a lot smoother, I think.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
and
on
I
the
think
small footprint, it's one of those things where they can be utilized or not, speaking for that third support company. But on the larger footprints, then you can start to divvy up in the divisions and start to work the floors too.
yeah,
Well, well, Nick, well, Nick, you were alluding to the smaller departments. You know what I mean? Like, I'll use my hometown department. Like, if they go to a one-story mom and pop tonight, they get basically three companies, and if they go to a multifamily dwelling tonight, they get three companies, and they make it work. You know what I mean? And those guys are really good at what they do. It just we keep talking about the priorities, but they really have their priorities, nailed down. Like, hey, on a multifamily, we're getting three units, and every one of them are riding short. Every one of those three-piece units have three people on it. You know what I mean? So, can you imagine? The OV guy on a multifamily of a three-person. Like, you have to be a stud. You know what I
yeah.
mean? You have to be a stud to achieve what you need to.
Well, and that's all. That's all if you don't find a victim. I think
Right.
I think tonight everybody at some point has pointed out like how much work it is when you do find a victim. I mean, you might be in the gym every day, you might be in shape, but I mean, I think every one of us knows that like the average 150 to 175 pound unconscious adult will humble all of us real quick in a fire, because it is hard for those that haven't done it yet. I mean, it is hard as hell to move an unconscious human being in a fire, and it's just a time. It is
Yeah.
a personnel suck. I mean, it's going to suck the personnel out of your incident. Go ahead, Chris. You want to say something?
I mean, yeah, the dead weight. I mean, they turn into one of the balloon people at the car dealership. You know what I mean? A dead weight body. They fold in ways that you wouldn't think that they do. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's you're absolutely right. It's a pain in the ass dealing with dead weight.
Well, and that's if you're already understaffed from the truck company perspective when you arrive, you're gonna be dunzo when they find a victim. Because I mean, every time I found a real victim at a fire that I can think of while I'm talking here, it was pretty much the last thing I did on that fire. Because like once I pulled that dude out or helped in pulling that person out, I was just, I mean, cooked. And maybe I just need to be stronger. I don't know, but it seemed to happen to a lot of the other people also. But what I mean by that is you got to account for, if you got to remove this victim, there's probably two or three people there that's, I mean, they're gonna be exhausted when they're done, and they may also be providing patient care. And I know, don't give me the EMS demerit, but like the point of removing the victim is so that they live, right? And part of that is making sure they have the medical care when they get out. And all three of us, we would do that when we were running academy stuff together, is make sure that when the recruits would bring somebody out, they started CPR or whatever. But that's a real world thing. The game doesn't end once they remove. And again, not to continue down the EMS demerit route, but just because I've seen this happen, I've seen fire victims brought out of a building and they go to hand it over to EMS or to the medics, and there is no medics. And that, like, now we're calling for them. We got a victim on the front lawn, a couple people from our limited staffing are doing CPR, and the ambulance is on its way. The survivability or the likelihood of survival for that person is not good.
Well,
And go ahead.
well, I mean, I agree with you, and I'm not shitting on EMS agencies at anyway, but there's very, very, very seldom that I've seen victims come out and EMS is ready to receive the patient. You know what I mean? It is. I've seen Bill. He was talking about sometimes when I rode the back of the truck, one night in particular, he was riding the seat. They drug a guy out of a house and they pumped on that guy's chest for quite a few minutes on the sidewalk before EMS ever picked him up. And you got to be prepared to do that. And that was the biggest thing that I used to love and still love about our academy, that our recruits are prepared to do that. Because if you train that you just hand the victim off, or you drop the dummy on the ground when you come out of the thing, that will create muscle memory, and you'll do that in real life. You'll bring the victim out, you'll set them on the ground, and you'll turn around and walk back inside.
Yeah, and there are some departments that aren't even sending EMS on a structure fire dispatch. It's not until there's a confirmed person trapped, or it's not until it's upgraded to a working fire. And I'm like, man, for a million reasons, whether it's civilian victims or firefighters like that, I just don't think that's the right thing to do. I mean, the likelihood of survival from a house fire is already the window of opportunity for a civilian to survive that is already narrow enough. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't be playing any games of taking seconds off that clock if you really want that person to survive. You know what I mean? And again, that we're all amped up about search, and I know that most of us would rather be on the fire truck than on the ambulance. But remember, the reason we're all amped up about search, and it's about them, and it's not what's survivable, it's what's searchable. The reason all that exists is so that this person lives and goes home, and getting them out of the building is only half, if that, of that equation. They've got you got to make sure that we're ready to do something with them after that.
I'm not going to talk about EMS.
I know. I can't believe the comments haven't come in yet, but I
think it's a protocol problem, really. It's just one of those things. You expect a lot from them because they, you feel like they should understand what you just went through to get that person out, and then for them to be like, man, he says to leave. That's it. Go get the bag. And it's like, man, like, you got to do something for me. It's like, that is that going to be me one day? It's like, dude, sorry, man.
Yeah.
So it is what it is.
Yeah. So. Well, I feel like we've had a really good conversation tonight. There's a lot of other things we can get into, so maybe we need to do a search podcast part 2. Are there any other things you guys wanted to get into here tonight, or?
If we do a part 2, I think we still have a lot to cover on part 2. Do you want to touch on VES ladders before we?
Yeah, that's always a hot topic, and the VES ladders, I have a little video here I'll kind of throw up real quick, just to showing kind of, I have a couple of them. I'll pick one here and kind of throw it up, and you'll kind of see one in action here. Go ahead.
Drop tank louder when you hear. Also 633 is in front of me. Also 633 is in front of me. Alright, we have one VES opportunity on the Bravo Charlie Plum, ladder 4 is doing that right now, and this will probably be the best. Agent for driver 633. Yeah! I'm going, hold on! That's clear, my window's clear. Engine 4622. I got a hail. I got a back. My dog's going, so I'm getting ready to get it. I have a tank over this.
So that was just a video from a recent fire. Kind of starts off there where you can see that VES ladder. And so let's kind of talk a little bit about that. What is the VES ladder, and when do we use it? What are your guys' thoughts?
So, I mean, basically, I've seen them vary anywhere from 4 foot to 8 foot in length, depending on how you cut them down. And a lot of times when we have them, it's a decommissioned ladder, and then there's still a portion of the ladder that can still be utilized. So we've cut it down to the appropriate length that we have. And a lot of times we use it for, if a home that's built in the grade, you know what I mean, it's got a little bit higher. It might be one story in the front, but two, a high crawl space, maybe two in the rear, and I can leap into the window just by utilizing that. But we have them. They get pulled, a decent amount. But a lot of times, people have concerns, and rightfully so. Some departments and a little bit more strict, and they're like, well, if that ladder was already decommissioned, why are we trying to utilize it for something else? You know what I mean? And I get the argument behind it, but it's such a reduced length that the weight bearing that's on that ladder is nothing more than a step up. You know what I mean? It's no different to me by using that shorter ladder is me using a Halligan bar against the building to get a step up, right? Like, is that Halligan bar designed to climb? No, it's not, but it helped me get my ass into the window.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's the number one question. Anytime I post anything about these VES ladders and how we cut them down is like, well, are we NFPA testing those? I'm like, well, I mean, does your department let you stand on a Halligan bar to go in a window? Do you have to get the Halligan bar tested to make sure it'll, dude, it's like 6 feet. It's like 6, 8 feet. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't have any real weight bearing to it. You know what I mean? It's a step up. You know what I mean? You could take a damn 5-gallon bucket in the backyard and use it to get in the window for all I care.
But man, they are worth their weight in gold, in my opinion. I mean, because it's the classic thing is it's for the window that's like too low enough to need a real ladder, but it's too tall enough just to hop in, and that's a lot of windows. A lot of windows are just, the base of that window is kind of right there, like just below your chest, and it's like, man, I could like try and muscle up in here, but that's really hard. When you've already done other fireground tasks and you're wearing gear and an air pack and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking, Bill?
I think they should be on all ladder companies or supports or however put them on an engine. I don't care. It is a decommissioned ladder. Typically, that's how you make them. I think that they should be mounted visibly because I think out of sight, out of mind. And I love them, but I haven't had good luck with them. Every time I pull that thing, it's either a house that's just like loaded up with boxwoods and the bushes and everything's overgrown. The houses that burn in some of these cities are, in the areas where it's like, we could have guessed that there was going to be a fire at this place one day, And, sometimes, crews, you have to pick your complement of tools, whether that's a ladder and a hook or a trash hook or whatever it is, and be multifaceted. And so sometimes you can still achieve the VES with a 14 or 16 foot straight. And, the VES is really just used for one thing, for the most part. We can get creative. And I think it's also beneficial of getting people out too, because I may have used a 14 or 16 foot to get in. Hey, give me that VES ladder. I can catapult this person from inside. Hoarder conditions are not putting a 16 foot straight inside inside this bedroom.
That's
so
great.
Just learn to work with it a little bit. For me, I try and carry a cache of equipment that can cover a lot of things. I carry a bar and I carry a New York hook. And if I'm OV, then I like my straight ladders. But, and I feel like I can do a lot with that. And I don't have to go back to the truck. So it's one of those things.
We've started, a lot of our fire trucks, for better or worse, are from a Quint era. And so what has really happened on the ladder trucks is where there used to be a cross lay or two, the hose has been removed, and those are now VES ladders, and they hold it great. On our newer companies, our new heavy rescue, we specified a place for VES ladders. I mean, it's right when they come out of the cab because we use them all the time. So it was part of the spec because we built chutes for them. We did the same thing on a new ladder truck that we just ordered. It's become a very integrated thing to the point that we're specifying locations for these on the rig, and they're not they're not in the ladder tunnel, because you leave that space for the longer ladders. But then, being that they're about the width of a fire truck or less, it's a perfect thing to put in some kind of transverse spot if you have that available to you.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I've seen them on the turntable. 7 carries one exteriorly. If you got something like the Boston spec, I'm sure you can slide something in there.
yeah,
on the
if you
exterior
got a
mount.
mid-mount tower, like like an aerial scope or something like that, under the boom going across the rig or under the bucket. I mean, if you look around, there's a lot of great places you can jam these things. And if you don't get wrapped around the axle about NFPA testing a 6-foot ladder, they're pretty easy to come by because everybody's got some old scrap ladders. You cut them up. It's easy to find spots on the rig for them. They're very lightweight. So it's pretty easy win,
Yeah.
All right. Thoughts? Anything?
I'm good. I think we
All
covered
right.
quite a bit.
It was a lot.
Yeah, and we got a lot more. So those listening, if you liked what you heard tonight, number one, everybody that was on here is part of our cadre of instructors, particularly our truck company operations and aerial operations programs. So if you're looking for anything to kind of amp up truck operations or some of these topics in your department, please reach out to us for some more information. And it sounds like we're going to try and do another maybe a part 2 to this where we get into some other issues. So if you have any other things that we didn't get into tonight that you would like to see addressed, drop them in the comments, shoot them to me via email, or go to our website. You can fill out a form there and it'll send it to us, and some things we can get into on this or future podcasts. But really appreciate everybody jumping on tonight. Hope everybody got some good stuff to take to the firehouse, to the bay floor, and the kitchen table next shift. And we'll be on here again next month. And until then, stay combat ready.